Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
You know, here's the unique thing about grief and the grieving process. You think there's going to be rules, but the reality is there aren't any. And if you're within the sound of my voice, that must mean you are in the seats with once more. As always, my name is Dave Voigt, and I'm the host of this podcast where we sit down with a wide-ranging variety of industry professionals and pick their brain about current projects, state of the industry, how they got started, and so very much more in a light and conversational fashion. And if you like how we do things around here, I'm assuming you do because you're listening to us right now, you can go subscribe to the podcast. We would love that. You can find us over at Apple, Spotify, Amazon, Google. It is all good. And plus, if you can give us a like and subscribe over at our In the Seats YouTube channel where we archive every single one of our episodes, that would be fantastic too. Plus, you can follow us on the social media, as the kids call it. We're over on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, at either at In the Seats or at It's Podcast One for all sorts of fun updates. And plus, we're on the TikTok at In the Seats just for a spot of fun. It's pretty silly, but we kind of like it. But to wrap it up, I do say finally, I say this a lot, but it's true. This is where it all started. Please come pay us a visit over at In the Seats, intheseats.ca for all the latest and greatest movie news, reviews, the world of cinema all across the globe, really, because we love talking about it all and writing about it all, and we love it when you come and read about it. So please stop on by. On this episode, we've got an interesting one. In theaters tomorrow, it's a little piece of Canadiana. It is a film called They Who Surround Us, and it's the story of a Ukrainian farmer living in Alberta who loses his wife in a tragic accident, and guilt and grief send him into this emotional spiral, which forces him to relive traumatic incidences from his childhood in the Ukraine. And it's a very personal story, and it is from writer, director, and star Troy Ruptash, who we got the distinct pleasure of talking with. And this film it can be a bit of a hard watch, especially for people who have had loss in their lives and had to deal with grief. But it really is a fascinating example of just the fact that when it comes to grief, there are no rules, and these things can manifest themselves in some pretty out there ways. And we talk with Troy about that and just the process of making the film and so very much more. And it was a great talk, which I hope you enjoyed. But check out his film, which is in theaters tomorrow, August 27th, and enjoy our talk with Troy. It's a good one. I mean, obviously, first off, congratulations on the film. Like, walk me through the inspiration for the story, because it really felt to me like a very sort of fascinating way to sort of depict and externalize the grief process, if that makes any sense.
That's like the core thing of the film that got this whole process going. You just said it exactly. Can we just use that? That's like, yeah, no, that's exactly what I wanted. And that's, I wanted to externalize and convey and portray grief in a way that would be palatable in some sense, so that people can experience that and go through the process that I have gone through in terms of with my grief. But yeah, you said exactly what the inspiration was for this. And it started with a photograph of my great uncle.
And I mean, I think the big thing that resonated for me is because there is this sort of, predetermined notion of grief and how it's supposed to be and how it's supposed to go. But as someone who has lost myself, there are no rules. Grief kind of happens in these very strange ways. And the way you set it up, it almost felt like it was a horror movie in some ways. Like there were these real interesting beats of your character sort of being terrified of what he was being haunted by.
Yeah, well, honestly, another thing that was sort of an impetus for this was that, I mean, I went through a period where I was experiencing a level of fear, me personally, Troy.
Yeah.
And I've struggled or dealt with anxiety throughout my life. But then I went through a period that I was like, this is something different. Something is going on. And I got really fascinated by epigenetics and transgenerational trauma. And, I always knew that my ancestors, did not have an easy time. And I started becoming fascinated with the idea of what gets passed on, even, unconsciously.
No, I guess that leads into my next question. Was the research all lived, or did you look into sort of more details surrounding, like, maybe even the science of it all?
I did. I start to, because I find my creative process, I work a lot with spontaneity, and I do a lot of dream work and journaling. But together with that, I love research. And so I did do, I would say probably 20% research, 80% the dream work,
Right.
but when there were times that I felt like I needed to research something, I did. And, fortunately or unfortunately, I definitely feel like I understand grief, and I definitely understand fear and PTSD.
Now, I mean, I guess my next question is because, I mean, you are a career working actor, and this is your first feature, and you wrote it, and, like, why did you want this to be the first feature? Like, was it just everything you've been describing and just sort of wanting to put that on the screen? Because it feels like you'd almost get PTSD from trying to do the undertaking yourself of making a film.
Yeah, it's interesting, and that would be the common assumption, I think, but it was actually the opposite. I mean, the period leading up to the film, the writing of the film, and all of the research got really intense, but then it began to shift. And what began to shift it actually was when I came back to Vegreville, where I grew up, and started talking to my family more about their upbringing, stuff that I knew, but also stuff that I hadn't heard, and learning more about my ancestors and what they went through. It was so healing. There was something about going into that darkness. That's why the imagery with the woods was really important to me, the idea of going into the woods and going through, but I felt like I knew that, like you say, I've been acting for a very long time, and I've been telling other people's stories. I knew that I wanted to tell my own story. I have for a while, and things aligned in a way that it was just very synchronistic, because I knew I wanted to tell this story. And then I heard about the Duplass Brothers Hometown Heroes project,
Right.
which is about encouraging filmmakers to go back to their hometowns to make movies, especially about underrepresented communities and cultures. And I thought, oh my God, this is perfect, because I've never auditioned for a Ukrainian character. I've never even, played a Ukrainian character. So I thought this is perfect, because I have this urgent need to learn more about my Ukrainian heritage and past and my ancestors. And I have this thing that's sort of this vessel for creating that through the Duplass Brothers competition. So it all sort of converged through that.
Well, and it very much feels like a love letter to your hometown as well in many ways, because I mean, it's a stunningly gorgeous film. It's shot immaculately. Can you talk a little bit about that, and just trying to sort of give it a very sort of distinct visual feel that, your character's playing inside of?
Yeah, that was so important to me, because first of all, I'm a painter, so I'm very visual, and I love color. I love, and I knew, especially shooting it in Alberta, I've always loved Malick's Days of Heaven.
Ah,
And I thought, here I have this amazing opportunity to shoot my first film in this landscape. And then I got so lucky. My DOP, Kamal Derkoui, is just the most incredible. He's a master. And so, we didn't even have to speak that much. Well, it was amazing, because my production office, because I'm so visual, I didn't storyboard in a traditional way. But my office was covered with this imagery, paintings, pictures I had pulled. And Kamal's office was right beside mine. And we'd come in the morning, and we'd kind of sit there, and I'd see him walk over to a section that was like Roman's nightmare or Roman's flashback. And he would look at it and he'd look over at me and we'd be like, yeah, I get it. And then he was able to take my vision and just elevate it in a way that I could not be more happy with the fact that he came into this project.
Now, I mean, I love that you dropped the Malick reference because I mean, I can definitely see it. And I mean, I'm curious, like,
Oh, good.
are those the kind of films that sort of got you into the business in general, made you want to be an actor?
Yeah, and it's only now that I'm sort of coming back to that because I feel like I sort of got off course a little bit as an actor, especially, I did a lot of theater in New York after leaving Toronto. And once I moved to LA, I got very much into the television world. And I feel like I sort of lost track, especially at that time. Television now is very different, and I can't wait to get back into it as a creator. But I sort of lost track of what really got me into this. And it's kind of amazing because with this film, it sort of came full circle because I have this, I was introduced to a gentleman in Toronto, Frank Mendocino, who watched the film and he said, it's incredible. He said, I feel like I want to pass this along to Adam Agoyan. And The Sweet Hereafter, I probably have a handful of films that have really, really stayed with me through my life. And The Sweet Hereafter is one of them.
For sure.
And so just hearing him say, I think Adam should see this film. I was on the floor for like 2 days. And then he gave us that amazing quote. And I thought so those are the filmmakers. And like Joanna Hogg, I love.
For sure. Oh God, yeah.
Kelly Reichardt. Yeah, Kelly Reichardt. I love sort of contemplative, poetic, visual storytelling. And, I love things that it's, well, you've seen the film. It's like I love to give the audience an opportunity to feel. So I don't want, some films, I feel like they throw so much at you and you may be experiencing a lot, but there's not a lot of time to process it. So, those are the filmmakers that inspire me. And I feel like that's what they do. So that's what I attempted to do.
Well, I think you did that, man, because I mean, you definitely allow your moments to sort of breathe and have air. And it's important when you want sort of the emotional resonance of the story to really hit home and make people think. And I mean,
Yes.
it makes for a beautiful thing. And I mean, I could imagine that's something you learn, like, because you mentioned you work in New York, and I knew you worked in New York, because I've got something I have to ask. There's something I'm always fascinated with, because in doing my research on you, I noticed one of your first screen credits, if not your first credit, was Law and Order. And
Yes.
whenever I talk to anybody who has worked in New York, especially in the 90s, it's such a badge of honor to have that Dick Wolf credit on their resume. Can you talk to me a little bit about sort of the joy of that collective joy of getting that job? Because I mean, if I'm not mistaken, especially back then, that was basically the shot in New York.
The only one. The only one. I was just, when I lived in New York, there was, because now there's a lot that shoots there. But at that time, Law and Order, the first, that was the only show that shot there. And I was on the first season. It's funny because, I still, not so much in the last couple of years, but I still get little royalty checks that come from that. And I'm like, a constant reminder of my character, Ponytail. It had like it's like so like 90s.
Well, I get that sort of shared essence of, I'm doing this little play sort of 3 degrees off Broadway, for no money. And I just got this job and it paid for my rent for 6 months.
Exactly. Yeah, it was pretty exciting when I got it. I remember. Yeah, it was pretty cool.
Because I'm always just fascinated about just sort of the shared sort of experience of, like, especially in the acting community in New York, going, hey, you got a Dick Wolf job? Good on you. You made it. Like, was it sort of a badge of honor?
Totally. Yeah. And especially, that's the thing I found about New York. And I find it took me a little longer to find it in LA, but in New York, that's where I started my career really. And I was such a part of the theater community, and that's such a community. And there's so much, it's just supportive, and there's like a lot of collaboration, and So yeah, there is, there is a lot of celebration of one another. And then, yeah, when you've been working in theater, sometimes you make decent money, but for the most part, you don't make a lot of money in theater,
Right.
especially the theater that I loved, which was a lot of like downtown theater.
Right.
And so, yeah, so suddenly you get the job, like Dick Wolf show. It's like, wow. And yeah, it's like, oh, wow, I get a nice, decent paycheck from this one.
Now I'm curious, like, how does the theater training sort of prep you for Hollywood and then sort of subsequently prep you to sort of be your own storyteller and make your own film? Because I mean, it feels like it's a very sort of natural progression to go stage to screen and then to sort of make your own stuff for the screen.
Yeah, I think so. And I'm grateful that that was the route that I took, because I feel like, I feel like when one starts in theater, it's not like you have to, but there is definitely a focus on craft. And not that there isn't in the film industry, but sometimes I think it's easier to sort of plop down into the film and television industry, never having trained, never having done anything before, and you can be amazing. But there's something about starting in the theater world where, you do voice and speech, you do movement, you do body work, you do all kinds of things that right away made me aware of the idea that there is a craft that I want to develop. And then translating that into film and TV was interesting. It didn't take that long. I know sometimes there's the idea that it's very different, but I feel like the mechanism at the core as an actor is the same. You just kind of tweak the output a little bit, depending on, if the camera's right here or if you're in close up or whatever. And there's a lot more you can do also, because you don't have to project. Whereas on stage, they have to hear you at the back of the house.
So, I mean, I guess that kind of dovetails into something else I'd like to ask, because I'm
Yeah.
always fascinated about the challenge of an actor directing themselves.
Yeah, and believe me, because I hadn't even directed a short before. I had directed stage,
Right.
and that's when I knew that, oh my God, I have found my play, my home. Directing is what I want to do. And when I had this opportunity, and I knew as I was writing it, I was like, I'm definitely Roman. I'm definitely playing Roman, and I know I definitely want to direct this. And before I went out to shoot it, I spoke to a couple of people. I spoke to, actually, I was working on The Rookie, and I was being directed by someone who had just done this. She had directed herself in a film. So I was like, let me pick your brain a bit. And she was great. And I spoke to a lot of people because, the major concern that I wanted to deal with was, do I want to have someone there to have eyes on me? And I decided not to. I thought, do I bring, I have a coach that I work with.
Right.
I thought I could bring them out and make sure I have someone who's watching me. But I found it actually really liberating to know that there wasn't anyone watching me in terms of, and it took me I was telling this to someone, it took me a few days to get used to it, because, as an actor, you're so used to having, after you shoot a scene, 3 people run up to you and tell you this and that and that. When I was doing They Who Surround Us, I kept expecting someone to come up to me and say, okay, you need to bring that down a little bit, or think of this, and obviously no one was, but it's like unconsciously, I still kept expecting that. And then when I finally realized it wasn't happening, it gave me a level of freedom as an actor that I feel like I've never had before. So, and I became less precious. My performance became less precious to me because I had so many other things to think about, right? And I think that was, in terms of the experience of it, that was great, because I wasn't as concerned with me, because I was worried about, oh, that lampshade over there is like creating a shadow or whatever it might be. And I had so many other things to think about. So I loved it, actually, and I would do it again.
That's fantastic. I mean, I've never quite thought of it that way, about how sort of the director and producer sort of responsibilities would sort of free you from the character work just to sort of do it and get it done. Because like in my brain, it would be like you'd want to do take after take, and then the other half of your brain would be like, no, we're losing the light, just get it done.
Yeah, Yeah. And I think there's, and I know because I also teach acting now, and I love teaching, and I work with a lot of actors and directing actors. There's always a tendency to overthink things. And for me, I love it when I hit that sweet spot where I'm just sort of, where I'm not thinking, I'm just sort of going with the impulse and not overthinking the scene and having so many other things to think about really made it easy to do that in terms of not focusing so much on my performance. But I would always watch playback
Right.
before we moved on. I would make sure, and I trusted my DP. I trusted Kamal. So
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, it's you make these things because of trust, and I mean, I think that really comes through in the film because you've made something that is really quite beautiful, but again, it's not gummed up with over machinations or over thought. It's just about, like you say, it's about the tweaks, it's about the
I
subtleties,
love
it's
that.
about just sort of allowing sort of those bits to breathe and just, thank you for the work, man, and keep doing the tweaks. And thank you for the time today, man. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
And don't forget to visit our friends over at Bay Street Video for all your DVD, Blu-ray rental, or purchasing needs this summer, as they are still open for curbside and some mailing delivery as well. Over at 1172 Bay Street, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, you can give them a call at 416-964-9088. That's 416-964-9088. Or send them an email at baystreetvideoto@gmail.com for any of your DVD and Blu-ray needs.